Welcome into the studio, and I'm using gouache paint. You can see I've just got a small plastic palette there with some gouache on there. All I'm going to do is just take a brush, some water, just plain water, this brush, medium-sized brush, synthetic brush. I'm going to water that black gouache down just a little bit, not much at all, but you need to do enough so that it comes off of the brush, but not so much that it's really watery. So just enough water there, making it, like I said, that ink consistency. My drawing board here I've actually now got flat for this. It shouldn't really run down anyway. It soaks into the pastel matte paper easily. It really sucks into it. Okay, so as I said, it shouldn't drip down. If it's doing anything like that, you've obviously got it way too watery anyway. Now I'm using brown pastel matte board. If you look at the reference photo to the left, you see it's got kind of a warm look to it. I could have used the dark grey, I could have used the light grey, but I thought that warm look to the paper already is going to help me with this. And the fact that it's a middle tone, when I start adding the lights, the whites to it, the white pastel, you see that show up easily. I say this in lots of my videos, but it's quite critical. That's the reason I use the mid-tone paper, so that highlights show up on there and also darks show up on there, as you can see with the stripes now. So once I've got the darks of the stripes all blocked in with this gouache paint, when I instantly begin adding some highlight, you'll see all of a sudden you can see the shape form of the zebra come alive immediately. Now if you was using a white paper, then obviously you wouldn't see that until you add virtually all of the mid-tones in. So why am I using black gouache? Why don't I use just black pastel pencils and just do each individual area at a time? Well, I found over the years one of the issues you can have with pastel is that it can smudge. So if I'm putting in the black stripes at this early stage and I'd really need them at this stage, or I'd start to lose the positioning of the stripes, that's where I've got a lot of possibility of smudging. And if I smudge into something like an area that needs to be pure white, I'm not going to easily ever get that pure white back. So you could use acrylic. The reason I don't use acrylic is some acrylics dry to kind of a plasticky appearance, some dry, shiny, which will then resist the pastel going on top. A couple of acrylics will dry matte, also watercolor black paint will dry matte as well, so you could use that. But personally, I just like the gouache. The tubes are not expensive and they last an extremely long time. And if you've got some on a palette and it dries up, you've only got to put a small amount of water back to it, and then it becomes usable again. So you don't have to throw it out. There's no wastage with it. Now I transferred my drawing to the pastel matte paper with black transfer paper. And any of those cheap transfer papers will do, because I didn't want to draw directly onto the pastel matte paper, because I don't want to be erasing any mistakes. And that's where transfer paper then becomes extremely useful. Now with gouache, it dries really fast. It dries fast on the palette as well, so you need to keep adding water to it very frequently, just to keep it workable. Okay, so I'm not going to bore you now with the blocking in of all of these stripes. I'll fast forward that part. No need to see me do exactly the same thing all the time. And then I'll just let the gouache dry naturally, which only takes, you can leave it 15 minutes and it's pretty dry, or go over it with a hair dryer. Now as you'll see that I'm blocking in the stripes, I'm not worried if they are going to be brown or black, because I know that the reddy colours and the browny colours with pastel will easily go over this black paint. Okay, so it's just as easy to block them all in with a flat black. Okay, so I've got a few colours here, different brands, Pitt, Carbothello, Derwent, and I'm using those in these lighter areas because the light areas on the zebra, as you can see, are not all white. We've got some whites in there, but we've also got a lot of warm whites, and in the shadow areas the white is actually tinged with a small amount of purple. Now there's no point me giving out, you know, these numbers. As you see, I'll use different colors to layer over this white for the different areas. This is a pretty advanced drawing to be doing. Not everybody has got the full set of Derwent or the full set of Pitt, Carbothello, Caran d'Ache. So you've got to use A, what you've got in your stock, and B, what you're seeing on your reference photo as well. And if you're doing a different zebra, the colors, even though it's a zebra, is black and white, but as you can see on the reference, it's anything but black and white. You're going to have different colors, shades and tones on yours. So you can see I'm just kind of going now in between the gouache black, and you can see the advantage of that now. I'm just resting my hand on the pastel matte paper. All that black is completely dry, so it's not smudging. There's no chance of it smudging at all, and I could actually go over it quite a bit with the white and you'd still be able to see the stripe there. So it's allowing me to work much more freely now. Don't have to worry about muddying and dirtying the whites at all. Now I'm using a Carbothello white, and I'm doing that because if I use something like a Caran d'Ache white, it's very, very soft, and then that can smudge a bit more. You can see I'm just pushing that into the paper surface with my fingers. It's not obliterating any of the black, and even at this early stage now you can see how it's going to develop. The whites, as I said earlier, are showing up lovely on that mid-tone paper. Now this is a really dark purple. That's a Derwent. I could have used a different brand. This is a Caran d'Ache. I've only got a few of those colours. But you can see I can just float the colour on top. Use it on the side. You won't pick it up that easily on a video screen to see the subtleties that I'm putting in. But in real life I can see the differences that's going in, and I want these colours to really vibrate and zing and have life to them. So I don't want things like flat whites, and as you can see on the reference by the side, there's virtually no pure black on the stripes either. So I can either put the white down first, as I did here, and then float the purple on top, or perhaps put a bit of the purple underneath and then put the white on top. It doesn't really matter. You do whatever you find is easier. And because the tone or the colour is generally white in between the stripes, that seems the more logical thing to do, to put the white down first. That's the main colour, and then put the subtleties like a glaze on top of them. Now I'm putting the whites in first because obviously if I went over the black stripes first, then I've got that potential of smudging a lot again. So I'm going to be doing a lot of the white part of the zebra, and then after that's done in the areas, that's when I'll be putting, you know, the richer colours then on top of the black stripes, and that's when it's really going to start to come alive. For the background at this stage, I wasn't sure what background I was going to do. I was thinking of actually doing it just like on the reference photo, but in the end I really wanted the reds of the stripes, or the richness of the stripes, to show to be very vibrant looking. And the best way to do that is to use a complementary colour. So the complementary for the orange is a blue, And that's what I end up actually doing on the zebra, and I decided that roughly halfway through the drawing. Now I didn't put the blue on until really close to the end because I wanted it to be a fairly flat colour, and I didn't want to be resting my hand as I am now. You can imagine if I had the blue already there, I'd have to use my glassine paper, and you know, I'd have that potential of muddying a light blue colour up. So that's why I put the background in, you know, really near the final stages. So I've got quite a bit of white down already, and now I'm going to start to think about lightening or colorizing these black stripes. So that's a Carbothello pencil. That's got the color all the way down the shaft on it. So that's, you know, pretty much a burnt sienna color. And as I said, I'm testing things out. Do I want to go lighter with it or darker? Is there a brown dark enough in the set to actually do the, you know, the dark chocolate areas? If not, I'm going to have to either put down a black first and then come over the top with a warm brown, or do that vice versa. I'll try those out because it works in different ways. So there's a lot of experimenting, you know, at the early stages in particular. You see I put a different brown over the top, a darker brown, but I still wanted it to look quite rich as well. So it's very rare that you're going in with one colour. It's much more frequent that you're going in with a colour and then adjusting it on top with something else. So the way I'm working now, as I said, it's really trial and error. I've tried out the colours on a bit of scrap paper, but you never quite know what it's going to come out like. I've also drawn a very similar head to this previously, and I've adjusted a bit of the head because I only wanted to test some colours out. So I've got a large drawing just above my drawing of this that I'm glancing up and down on. And that's helping me judge the kind of colours that I want to use on those stripes. Just indicating where the real dark blacks of the eye is. And I can quite easily go over the section that will have the eyelashes as well, because the eyelashes are not that much lighter than the dark of the eye, so we can quite easily then put pastel over that. I don't need to draw around the eyelashes at all. And here I'm just going in. That's a light purple colour. That's Derwent again. I'm not a slave to any brand, so if you see the colours that you like, that just use it. Don't worry about the brand. But Pitt, Carbothello in particular are a bit harder. Derwent is slightly softer than those, but a bit more prone to snapping. And then we've got the soft ones like Caran d'Ache and Gioconda, and that makes them much more difficult to sharpen really if you're using something like a crank handle sharpener. So that's why you'll see me use much more often than not the Carbothellos and the Pitts. You can see here, that's where I'm trying out now those rich colours on the stripe, and you can see that the gouache takes the pastel on top perfectly. When it dries, it has very similar feel to the pastel mat, slightly rougher, but you can definitely get a couple of layers on top of that as well, so I'm never concerned about it. I do exactly the same if I was doing a tiger with those stripes. And the other alternative then, if you didn't want to use gouache but you've got the new Clairefontaine freezer spray, would have been to have done the black stripes in black pastel and then just spray them to freeze them in place. So you would have ended up with, you know, pretty much the same thing. Now I'm going to continue blocking in and colorizing some of these stripes in this small area, and that's then going to set up the feel, you know, what I'm going to use on most of the zebra as I work on the other areas. So I'm going to be following very much a similar format on this, as far as blocking in the white areas, colorizing them a bit by glazing colors on top, and then putting in the stripes later. So what you're going to see on this video is quite a lot of a repetitive format. Obviously there's lots and lots of stripes. They're all slightly different, but I'm going to attack it pretty much the same way. So this video, compared to a lot of my others, I'll fast forward, I'll speed up quite a bit of it, so it's not extremely boring for you, but I will slow it down then when I'm doing anything that's very different from what I've already shown. You can see I'm using quite sharp pencils because I need a fairly sharp edge. Some of these stripes, especially on the forehead coming down to the nose, they're really quite thin, so I need that ability to detail. Now here I'm putting the black in first. I know it needs to be lighter than that, but I need something underneath first, and I'll put the blacks in and then come on top with a lighter colour, a purple or a lighter grey, just to give that sheen. And the sheen effect, that's all coming, or is all created just by the highlights on top of the black stripes, really. Here you can see how I'm just floating in again some of that lighter purple colour. It's all about trying to pick up on the little nuances, the little differences that we see in individual areas. Now this area coming up from just in front of the eyes onto the forehead, you can see there's a lot of richness where that sienna colour is really bleeding into the white as well. So rather than block this area in white, you can see it's mainly a richer, warmer colour, so it makes sense to block that in, really rub that in place, and then I can pull out the individual white areas and put in the darker, more prominent browns on top of that. I like to look at the reference photo, blur my eyes and see what the major colour is in there. You can see how I can go lightly over the black stripes as well, and still you can see the positioning of them. And I can still get even a pure black there if I wanted to. So then I can come back in and pull out the individual stripes. See, quite a steady hand to separate them, and all of a sudden the zebra is starting to look more like it's got some shape and form to it. I don't have to follow all of these stripes, let's just ease up on that and just put in the general impressions on where they're going. I'm not counting excuse me, I'm not counting stripes or anything at all. I'm just roughly putting them in the place I'm seeing on the reference photo. The major stripes, yes, I've got those in the right place. But when we're talking about the little areas where they're all clumped together, I'm not concerned about them at all in those areas. I can, because my fingers are a bit bigger than I wanted to blend in this area, that's when I can use these paper stumps. Just pushing the pastel into the surface, it creates a smoother appearance, and although pastel mat doesn't create much dust, by pushing it in like this it's even less, and allows me to put in more layers on top. And now I've got a lot of the general colour on the forehead and the whites around as well. I can come back in now and start to detail up some of these stripes. So some areas are much darker than other areas, and some areas are almost white even in the black sections because of that glossiness, that sheen to the stripe. So fairly sharp pencil again. I'll be using a sharper pencil on this drawing more than I normally would, just because I need that accuracy. So going in first with the dark, and then you'll see me put the brown on top. Now when you're doing your drawing, it's up to you as well, don't forget, if you want it to look more contrasty, so perhaps have the stripes even darker than you're seeing on the reference photo, or even look more colourful. As the artist, you've got to think what you want it to look like in the end. It doesn't have to be exactly like the reference photo, especially if you're not that great with image editors like Photoshop, because in this one I increased the brightness on the reference photo, I increased the vibrancy a little bit on there as well, all to try and get it as close to how I wanted my finished drawing to look. Now sometimes you can struggle with that with the image editor, so then you really need to use the reference but actually make those adjustments and how you want it to look in the end on the drawing itself and in your mind, actually before you're putting the pencil down to paper. So you can make those adjustments in your head, but it's really easier to try and get the reference looking as close to what you want your finished drawing to be as possible. So starting to work my way towards that forehead, and this is an area where you need to kind of be a bit more careful. I don't want it all ending up a real muddy mess in there. And if I started to blend a lot as well, I wouldn't be able to pick out individual stripes, and before you know it I would have lost the whites and the lighter colours I've got in there. And then it would be a dirty, greyed out, muted type of mess, which I don't want. So I'm using a fairly sharp pencil and trying to preserve a lot of those white areas in between. So now I've switched to the brown pencil, darker brown. Which wasn't showing up that much, so I've gone back to the black. Because it doesn't really matter if I go a bit darker than the reference photo. As I said, it's all according to what I wanted in there. But you can see there how easily the reds, these warm rich colours, can go over the blacks. Now I'm just starting to do a bit more work on that fiddly forehead area. As I said earlier, I'm not worried about, getting these stripes exactly right at all. I just want to get a bit of that richness, that reddy look to it. And then in these other areas of the stripes, it's surprising how red some of these areas are, and then they go to more of a muted brown and then over to the black, and then as you come down the nose they go to a richer, lighter brown. So even in the stripes, even in the redness or the warmth of look of the stripes, there's even variances in there as well. So I'm using probably 3 or 4 different colours for the brown red effects of the stripes. Then I've got the black part of it. So I'm using at least probably 15 different colours, even just at this stage. Now as you become more experienced with your drawings and your artwork, that's when you will start to see lots and lots of different shades of colours as I'm seeing. Now you can't rush that. Okay, so that's experience as well. So don't worry if you can't see all the different colours in the whites. With experience, practice and keeping at it, that's when you're going to see those much more easily yourself. Now this makes a bit of a change from the stripes. This is quite a fun part to work on as I come down the nose area. So I'm using this kind of a burnt sienna or burnt umber appearance, this colour. You can see it just comes down, and the secret with the nose is to keep it nothing sharp in there. You can see all those browns in there are really smooth and blended. Some of that colour goes up here as well. And it really got a nice soft transition coming down from the stripes. where they almost blend right in to this area here. And then it goes a bit darker before it goes into the greys. And when you want something to be smooth, make sure you're blending it in. And if you're seeing lots of the texture of the paper, put more layers on. More layers, more blending. And as you increase the layers, that's when it becomes smooth. Lots of people who are using pastels and pastel matte paper for the first time, they think it's, especially if they come from coloured pencil, and they think it's gritty or grainy, but we can make it extremely smooth as long as you build the layers up. You want to be building a layer on top of a layer, and do that slowly because you don't want lots of pastel around initially. You're building the layer of refinement up, and as I said, that's when it becomes very, very smooth, as smooth as you want the transition to be. So let's work on the mouth and the nose. We've got some purple colour in there as well, a tinge of purple. So that's what I'm laying down now, using my pencil on the side, because I've not got any real hard edges in there, as you can see on the reference photo. It all looks really soft and velvety. So that's why I'm, as I said, use it on the side rather than digging into it with the point of the pencil, because that just takes the point of the pencil away. By doing that, it means you've got to keep sharpening it all the time. This way I'm keeping or even increasing the sharpness of the pencil while I'm blocking in that colour. We've got some lighter grey on there as well. Now I'm coming in with my black, refining the shapes more, the edges. In this section of the mouth it goes to a bit more of a warm colour, and under the chin. And now just using my black on the side then, so I'm not obliterating the colours that I've already put on, but I'm just darkening them. You see, I'm being quite careful now because I want to, without digging the pencil in and creating a mark I struggle to get rid of, I want to actually see the shape. Just refine the shape, make sure I've got that right. Then pencil on the side again because I know I'm going to blend this area with my fingers. So when you don't want a real hard edge, or in fact use the stump, because I wanted to blend it more than I'd really get with my fingers. When you use these soft stumps, you can use them to really create a very, very smooth transition. So you can see how it's all about, accuracy. You start off with finding the major shapes, where the lights are going to be, where the darks are going to be, and then you're building up the accuracy, gradually going darker and darker, and then coming in with the lights and the mid-tones on top of it. So it's a very gradual process. And as I'm coming on top now with these purples, you can see that the shape of the nose, that's all starting to make much more sense. It's all looking more three-dimensional, more accurate. We've got to put the underwork in first before you can build the highlights on top. And these are highlights, even though they're not bright white, they're subtle. They're still what's giving the shape and the form. So you still need to be accurate with them. Now same with the lower lip, got the darks in place. Then I come back in with the highlights and really add in those details. I want this area to be nicely detailed because obviously the mouth is a real eye-catching area. That's what viewers are going to look at a lot, and they're going to expect detail and realism there. So now I'm going to start working out from the mouth and doing the stripes again, following those same principles. As I said, remember I said earlier on, you can put, if you see a bit of purple tinge to the whites, you can put some of the purple down first and the whites on top, or do it vice versa. Doesn't really matter, as long as you don't go putting too dark a colour down under an area you want to be a white stripe. If you go too dark, you're never going to get a vibrant white back on top of it. Okay, so exactly the same principle you've seen me do numerous times now, so I'm going to speed this up and you just see me blocking it all in. Now this jaw area, you can see there's a lot of richness to the colour. So I've got the whites in first, then I'm just using this Carbothello pencil on its side, and I'm using really light pressure, just enough for the pastel to glaze over the surface of the white. You can see how that's warming that up nicely, and you can see as well how much easier it is because I've got those black stripes painted in. So I'm not worried about blending over the top. You can easily see the position of the stripes. So it's just a case of get the white in place and then glaze the colour on top to warm it up. Now if I didn't have the stripes in gouache, or I hadn't set them with the Clairefontaine spray, I'd really find this extremely difficult and a lot more time consuming. I think this drawing took about 7.5, 8 hours to do, which is fast, I think, for the size of it and the amount of detail that I put in the end. And I think I could really double that time and wouldn't have had the same finish if I hadn't put those black stripes in the way I had. So I just carry on now with this blocking in. Okay, so as I slow the video back down, I think this would be a pretty good place to leave the first video, to finish the first video. We're about 50 minutes in. You've seen the general principle of the way that I'm going to do the zebra. And you've seen me glazing on top as well. I'm just putting a little bit lighter highlight in for the eyelashes. And you've seen how I've coloured the reds as well, or the rich colours on some of the stripes too. So as I said, as I'm just going to put a few more touches to the head and the bottom of the jaw and some of the stripes here, I think this would be a good spot to finish. And I'll see you all again on part 2.